Welcome, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Well, thank you, Kaushik.
You
It's a
can
pleasure.
talk to the students, ma'am. Yeah.
Yes. So I see we have 88 participants, and
Yes.
a few more will join. And
Yeah.
that's heartening to see that we are drawing audience now. So without any wasting any time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Gurpreet Singh Kochar, who's DM in pediatric neurology from AIIMS. I'm presently a consultant in pediatric neurology at SPS Hospitals, Ludhiana. So the first slide actually says it all. And over to Gurpreet, please.
Shall I start? I think it's already 9.
So we're talking about motor system examination in children.
Thank you, ma'am, for introducing me. And friends, it's a difficult times, but teaching never ends and learning never ends. So we'll all learn from each other. So today it's a very simple topic, but at the same time, it's very, very important part of neurological examination in children, which is motor system examination in children. So we'll begin straight away. So I'll just briefly touch about the anatomy of the motor system, because if you don't know the anatomy, it's very difficult to localize the lesion. Then main focus will be on clinical examination, that is on bulk, tone, power, reflexes. Although coordination and abnormal movements, they come under motor examination only, but I'll not be covering this, as there may be some separate talks on movement disorders and cerebellar signs. And lastly, again, 1 or 2 slides about localization of patterns of weakness. So we all know that our brain is divided into 2 parts by central sulcus. And in front of the central sulcus, there is a motor cortex, and more anterior to this is premotor cortex and supplementary motor area. These are the main motor areas of the brain. Near about 60% of the neurons, the motor neurons, the axons of the cells, they arise from these areas. And rest 40%, they arise from all the different areas of the brain. So after arising from this motor neurons, if we take cross section of this areas, the outer one is the gray matter. The inner one consists of the axons, myelinated axons of these neurons, the bed cells, and then they descend as these corona radiata. They descend as corticospinal tracts. They descend from corona radiata, then posterior limb of internal capsule, and then they leave the brain and enter the brainstem and decussate in the medulla, in the pyramids of medulla, and then they descend in the spinal cord as corticospinal tracts. This is anterior corticospinal tract. This is the lateral corticospinal tract, which is controlling the opposite side. And then they synapse with the alpha motor neuron. And then from here, the lower motor neuron starts as roots, plexuses, nerves, and a neuromuscular junction, and this supplies the muscle. So from the brain till the anterior horn cell, that is the alpha neuron, this is upper motor neuron. And from anterior horn cell till the muscle it supplies is the lower motor neuron. So each area of the brain, this is the motor homunculus we are all familiar with. Each part of the brain represents a different part of the body. So whenever, suppose I have a signal to move the thumb, I want to move my thumb. So I'll have signal in this area of the brain, and then the motor pathway will descend as lateral or anterior corticospinal tracts, and then will activate the muscles accordingly. There are mainly 2 motor pathways, the lateral pathway and the anteromedial pathway. Lateral pathway is mainly responsible for the voluntary muscle control, the movements of your hands, the movement of your arms, forearms. So if you want to move your skilled movements of hands and arms, they all depends upon your lateral pathway. So lateral tracts include lateral corticospinal tract and rubrospinal tract. But because anterior corticospinal tracts, although they are part of anteromedial pathway, but this is included in the lateral pathway because it again controls the voluntary muscle control. And then the anteromedial pathway, which is responsible for axial muscle control and posture. They are vestibulospinal, reticulospinal, and pectospinal tracts. So predominantly the voluntary muscle control is supplied by the pyramidal tracts, which are corticospinal tracts, and rest all are known as extrapyramidal tracts. So this is just to show the lateral pathway, the lateral corticospinal and the rubrospinal. It arises from the cortex, and rubrospinal arises from the red nucleus of the brain, which is in midbrain, and then it descends to the opposite side and again supplies the from the spinal cord to other things. So this is responsible for the voluntary control. Anterior pathway, these anterior corticospinal tracts, vestibulospinal, pectospinal, reticulospinal, they are responsible for axial and proximal muscle control, posture, and the balance. So lower motor neuron, we already seen that they start from the this anterior horn cell, and then with the efferent nerve, they forms the plexuses, nerves, and then supplies the intra and extrafusal muscle fibers of the muscle. Basic differences. This is the basic which we start reading in physiology in part 1, that what is the difference between the upper motor and lower motor neuron lesions. So the upper motor neuron lesions, the patient is a spastic, they have hyperreflexia, positive Babinski, and weakness is of upper motor neuron type. That means the flexors of lower limbs and extensors of upper limb, and it causes disuse atrophy, which is slight. Lower motor neuron lesion, they are hypotonic, hyporeflexic, but the main differentiating point is the denervation atrophy, which is very marked in this. And the Babinski is not there, so it is the flexor plantars, and the weakness is generalized, proximal, or distal, depending upon the pattern of the weakness. So what is the pattern of upper motor neuron pattern of weakness? You just imagine a hemiplegic child, how he walks. We all know that they keep their limbs flexed. So this is these muscles are spastic, the elbow flexors. So the extensors will be weak. So weakness is predominant in extensors, and spasticity is predominant in flexors. In wrist, in lower limbs, the weakness is predominantly in the flexors. And this is the dorsiflexed, and extensors, they are spastic in the upper motor neuron lesion. Hope you understand the spasticity. It is predominant in anti-gravity muscles, and weakness is predominant in the muscles opposite to the spastic muscles. So now come to the main focus, that is the motor system examination. So as soon as the patient enters your OPD, or wherever you are sitting, or if you're giving an exam, which the parents bring their child, so you observe. You observe the posture while the child is sitting or standing, or is he able to walk. If he is able to walk, then make him walk normally. At the same time, in children, we have to sometimes change the sequence of examination while doing it, but while presenting it should be same, that motor, bulk, tone, power, reflexes. You can test tandem gait, Romberg sign at the same time, and look for any steppage gait and waddling gait. And in the arms, you can look for pronator drift, and ask the patient to sit down on the floor and get up, and then do toe walking, heel walking, and then hop on each foot. So this is a basic screening exam which will test many of your muscles which you are interested in. Just to briefly show you that I'm asking him to walk, so you can see the prominent waddling, which is due to hip abductor weakness. So you can see I'm asking him to walk on toes, and then walk on heels. There is some difficulty more on the left side in walking on heels. The waddling has increased. So if heel walking is difficult, then the weakness is in dorsiflexus. So I'm asking him to sit, stand. There is no Gower sign. And then lastly, you can ask him to stand on the chair, just see the level of support he requires. So this is just to tell you that there are some basic screening exam which you can do whenever the patient enters your OPD. So now, before starting the examination, there are some essentials. Maybe I hope there are some DNB students also, so you get OSCEs. It is very, very important in OSCE and otherwise also. Whenever we meet in our OPD or in our clinics, that patient comes, we first, I go to see a patient in a ward or an emergency, I first introduce myself. He doesn't know who am I. So I tell that I'm Gurpreet Kocher, I'm a pediatric neurologist. So I'll be seeing your child. And आपका नाम क्या है? And then in this COVID times, wash hands very, very carefully and then explain the examination. मैं आपके बच्चे को देखूंगा, इसका लात और हाथ और पैरों को मोड़ के देखूंगा and then gain consent for examination from parents and gain consent for exposure. Without adequate exposure, your neuromuscular examination or the motor system examination is incomplete. First, start testing the muscle bulk. You have to do nothing but to observe the child from a distance, but adequate exposure is must. If you are if you're exposing the child 2/3, you are missing out on 1/3 of examination. Firstly, look for asymmetry, and then you should look for any scar, wasting, involuntary movements, fasciculations, tremors. You can remember it by mnemonic Swift. Specifically look for face, shoulder girdle, pelvic girdle, thenar eminences. These are the places where atrophy and hypertrophy of muscles, they specifically give you clues for the diagnosis, if there is facial weakness, shoulder weakness or not. You should remember that prominent wasting is usually seen in neurogenic disorders, that is anterior horn cells and nerves involvement is there. When LMN weakness is there, there is predominant wasting. Some people use fixed points. Suppose you are doing an examination, a neurologist or your colleague comes and mujhe ek side, I feel that one side of the limb seems to be thin. So what I'll do is I'm not feeling that, so I'll measure. So where you should measure, there are fixed points. You can decide your fixed points, but mostly mentioned in books. You can test upper limbs at 10 centimeter below and above olecranon, and in thigh 18 centimeter above tibial tuberosity. It is also helpful in the AFP reporting. They always measure bulk. So you can just see this child that how diffusely reduced. This is a child with leukodystrophy with neuropathy. The child has diffuse loss of muscle bulk. He's so thin, you can see the arms, almost all the muscles generalized are thin. But this is not the adequate exposure. You should see whether pectorals and abdominal muscles and hip muscles all are atrophied or not. Just don't forget to look at thenar and hypothenar eminences. This is the main areas which are atrophied. This is hypothenar eminence, this is thenar eminence, and look at the internal muscles of the hand, the interosseous and lumbricals, how atrophied they are. So this is distal atrophy due to a neuropathy. You can see this high riding scapula, the atrophy of humeral muscles, and the atrophy of the pectoral muscles, and all three siblings have almost expressionless species. So this is facioscapulohumeral dystrophy. So if I forgot to ask him to take off his shirt, I would miss all these things. Do not forget to expose the child carefully. Then after ruling out atrophy, just look for any hypertrophy. True hypertrophy is seen in the myotonia congenita or paramyotonia congenita, and this the child looks muscular and there is myotonia. And pseudo hypertrophy, that is fibrotic and rubbery feel of the muscles, is seen in Duchenne muscular dystrophy and LGMD, sarcoglycanopathies, SMA, hypothyroidism, and glycogen storage disease. There are many causes, so many times it is asked that if it is not DMD, what can it be if there is calf hypertrophy? So this is valley sign. I am starting a poll also. Launching a poll, if you can all see. Just try to end the poll, mark the poll. This is a valley sign. It was described by whom? I've asked the question. I'll just wait for some time till the poll is answered. In this, you can see there is hypertrophy of the deltoid muscles and some part of the deltoid muscles and the infraspinatus muscles, and there is atrophy. Atrophy is by the axillary fold, which is formed by latissimus dorsi, subscapularis, and teres minor. So I think many of you have told, but still We'll wait for a minute and then we'll end the polling. I'm sharing the results. Most of you are right, 46% of you are right that it was, hope you can see the polls, that it was described by Dr. Sunil Pradhan, who is from Lucknow, from where ma'am is there. So he's a very eminent neurologist from SGPGI. And so this is valley sign. This is infraspinatus. There are sometimes there is not proper atrophy of the muscle, the whole muscle. There are some patchy atrophy and hypertrophy of the muscle. So this is quadriceps muscle, which is atrophied here. Okay, atrophied here and hypertrophied in some places. The vastus lateralis is hypertrophied here. So this is called as diamond on the quadriceps sign in dysparlinopathies. This is a lump on the biceps. So some part of the biceps is atrophied and some part is hypertrophied. So again, to emphasize that nobody will ask at PG level what is diamond on quadriceps sign, but you should not miss the exposure, that you have exposed properly and told that there is some lumps here and there in the muscle. Also try to look at some contractures and other things, like this is a clawing of hands, which is by, because of the weakness of intrinsic muscles of the hand. Brachii and lumbricals are atrophied. This is a child with foot drop. And in particular, there is a small muscle here, EDB, extensor digitorum brevis, which is very early to go in anterior horn cells and neuropathic diseases. So it is also helpful. In muscular diseases, it may be hypertrophy. So look for EDB wasting. Also look for scapular winging, which may be due to serratus anterior weakness or trapezius weakness. There are some differences. You can read also that in serratus anterior weakness, the whole of the medial border is elevated, and in trapezius weakness, only the lower angle is elevated. So you can test the trapezius in forward arm abduction like this, and in trapezius you have to. It is better accentuated by abduction of the arm. There are some differences which you should know. Now coming to the second part, muscle tone. After bulk, it is tone. Tone is the tension and relaxed muscle and resistance to passive stretch in the absence of voluntary contraction. So the muscles is supplied by alpha motor neurons and gamma motor neurons. Alpha ones supply the extrafusal fibers. Gamma motor neurons supply the intramuscular fibers. So resting tone depends upon the activity of intrafusal muscle fibers innervated by gamma motor neurons. And so to start with, you have to look at the posture. So look at this frog-like posture which is there. It is child with SMA. This is a typical hypotonic posture. And then palpation and percussion, although do not contribute much, but they can sometimes help. For example, in a pseudo-hypertrophic muscle, the muscles are rubbery and hard. And in a denervated muscle, they are small and they are separated into strands. And if the muscle is tender, you know it can be myositis or inflammatory myopathy, and they can be infection also. Percussion is helpful in recognizing myotonia. You can just see this video of myotonia. Whenever you percuss, the muscle goes into contraction. So you can test it at the thumb, or you can test it on the deltoid muscle, and just play it again. Okay. So next, the most important part of tone assessment after inspection and palpation is determining the resistance of relaxed muscle to the passive stretch and assessing the range of motion. And assessment should be done through the full range of motion and then at varying speeds. So this is very, very important. You have to be both slow and quick while examining the tone. There are some steps which you should remember. First, ask the patient to relax. Look at the posture of the child. Secure the limb by holding the proximal joint from where you're testing the tone, and then move the tested limb through its passive range. For example, if you want to test flexor muscle tone, start with the joint in flexion. If you're testing extensor muscle tone, start in extension and then flex. And note the catch and the resistance in both things. And test bilaterally. Do not forget to test both sides. The note is, the catch is the patient must be relaxed and test should be performed at varying speeds. So this is, you can test in sitting position also. So first I'm trying to rotate. In flexion and extension, you can see that while I'm extending From flexion, it is spastic. So this is flexor spasticity is there more on the right side. And this is, I'm testing tone of pronator muscles. So this is important. So in testing lower limbs, just roll the limb from side to side. It tests the adductor tone and then flicker it below the knee. Flickering helps whenever you flick up the knee. So the foot ideally should move to a certain distance on the ground, on the bed, and then it may get lifted. If the child is spastic, when you flex the knee, when you suddenly lift up the knee, the foot will be elevated, right? And if the child is hypotonic, the foot will go a long way around, along the bed. So that is the importance of this flicking and the knee. Then you test inflection. So this is flexor tone, and this is extensor tone. This is extensor tone, and that was flexor. So testing tone at ankle joint. Also simultaneously test for the clonus. Test all the muscles. So this is, the child is, if I'm starting from a flexion position, it is flexor tone. This is extensor tone, and this is flexor tone. Note that I am varying the speed and testing both the sides simultaneously. Tell the asymmetry. Lastly, wrist joint, flexion, extension. Hope you are clear. So after tone, last part is muscle strength. So there are two ways to check muscle strength. One, you make the muscle short. That means if you're testing the biceps, you flex the biceps and then try to extend. So that is a better way because muscles are strongest when acting from the shortest position, and weak muscles should be tested in strongest position. The other way, in children, it is very difficult. But other way, the starting from the extended position, if you're testing flexors, that is also correct. But better way is to start from flexion. Check the free movements and range of motion. Similarly, in the tone, stabilize the proximal joints and rule out confounders. If the child is having pain, your muscle strength testing won't be fruitful. So look for any pain, spasm, contractures, extrapyramidal movements, and ataxia, which will be confounder to your muscle strength assessment. This is the same functional assessment which we did initially, that screening examination. Just see this. I'm asking the patient to keep the supinated, and the child has pronation of the hand. So this is called as pronator sign, which indicates hemiparesis, early indicator of hemiparesis. So whenever you are you're not sure that if the child has upper limb weakness or not, you test for pronator sign, which is quite sensitive. Next, coming to manual muscle testing. So this is a good way to test muscle power. It is the grading of muscle power by a 5-point scale called as MRC scale. This scale, although was originally developed to assess peripheral nerve injuries, but is being used all over the world to assess muscle power, although it is a little subjective, and it is weighted towards the evaluation of weak muscles. So I'll discuss about MMT. There are many ways to test muscle power. So nothing is wrong. You can test the way you want, but if you're adopting a standard procedure, nobody will question you. And it is good to compare the muscle power from one serial examinations. So why it is performed, just test, is the muscle weak? How much the muscle is weak? Is there any asymmetry? Is it any pattern like proximal more than distal, or any other particular pattern like a scapuloperoneal weakness or a limb girdle weakness, and to monitor progress of the weakness. For example, in GBS cases, you want to every time grade that, tell the parents that yes, your child is improving, your muscle power is now 3/5, 4/5. So what is this grading is important to remember. When there is no movement, it is grade 0. If there is a movement of the muscle, but there is no movement at the joint, that means only a flicker of the muscle movement is seen. That is grade 1. Grade 2 is when the muscle is movement, the joint is moving, but when gravity is eliminated. It cannot move the joint, move the limb against gravity. So that is grade 2. Grade 3 is when you can move against gravity but cannot move against resistance. It doesn't sustain resistance. Grade 4 is against some resistance. Again, it has been divided into 4 minus 4, 4 plus, but you may remember this much only. And fifth is normal strength. Some again basic rules of muscle power testing. Patient position is important. That which muscle is to be tested in which position. I'll just show you that there are some muscles which are better tested in sitting, supine, sideline, and prone position. Joint position is important. The proximal joint has to be stabilized, and the check range of movement, rule out pain. Check normal side first if it is unilateral weakness, and you have to demonstrate the child कि ऐसे करना है. You have to आप ऐसे मोड़ के रखो, मैं आपका हाथ खींचने की कोशिश करूंगा, उसे खींचने नहीं देना, मुझे बाहर नहीं आने देना. Do not change the position repeatedly. Don't do like this that एक बार supine में किया, then you test in sitting position, then again make him supine, then again make him stand. So try to test everything together. You should practice in your daily.
Gurpreet, there are people who are raising their hands. Can I ask you to keep your questions till the end, please?
Questions of poll, ma'am?
No. These are some people who have raised their hands.
Yeah. We
To
can
say something.
I think we can discuss at the end, ma'am. As
Allow
you say.
them to talk because there's quite a few of them. I'll just ask.
Yeah. If
The question, please. You'll have to unmute yourself first. Well, then we are wasting time. So please keep your questions till the end. You can write down your questions and type them for the question and answer session. Yes,
Okay.
please continue.
Okay. I'll begin. So do not change the position repeatedly. If the child is having grade 3 power, don't try to test grade 2, grade 1. So start against gravity. And one hand should be stabilizing the proximal joint and other hand should be applying the resistance. We'll see the videos. This is a chart showing which muscles to be tested in which position. This is for grade 3 power. This is not for grade 2 and below. 3 and above, you should test in these positions to eliminate gravity. So, for example, we are testing here in supine position is for neck muscles and trunk muscles. So he's unable to raise his neck and then turns and then raises his neck. So what grade of power this is? This is grade 2 power because against gravity he is unable to lift the head. So next vector weakness is prominent in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, myotonic dystrophy, which causes a Swan neck deformity, facioscapular humeral dystrophy, acid maltase deficiency, that is Pompe's disease, inflammatory myopathy. So quite a bit of causes of neck flexor weakness. So for grade 2 power, I'll just ask otherwise, or I'll do a poll. Just see, I'm launching a poll. Just try to answer this. The patient is able to reach top of the shelf of the kitchen shelf, but is unable to put an object heavier than a small cup of water. What grade of power is this? So in neck muscle, grade 2, what should be the position? The position should be supine position. In a sideline position, the child can move from side to side. It's almost 40 seconds, so I'm ending the poll here. So 70% of you have getting the results. 70% of you have replied correctly. It is grade 3 by 5. So the child is able to reach the top of shelf. That means it is against gravity. That is 3. But is unable to put heavier object than a cup of water. That means he is not able to sustain resistance. So it is not 4. So it comes 3. It could be 3 plus, 3 minus. That is a different story. But it is 3. Okay. Right. Right. So this was supine manual muscle testing. Next is sitting. You can test these muscles in sitting: shoulder abduction, elbow flexion, elbow extension, wrist flexion, wrist extension, hip flexion, knee extension, and ankle dorsiflexion and inversion. So these are the muscles to be tested in sitting position. Just see the video. Sorry, these are little old videos. So this is abduction. I'm testing deltoid. First I'm demonstrating, checking range of motion. This is testing deltoid, then test the other side also. And then elbow flexion by biceps and brachialis. Then extension. So this way I am trying to eliminate the gravity. In triceps, if you test in the biceps position, that will not be eliminating, the gravity will be helping. If you do a Bharat Mata Ki Jai for testing triceps, that will eliminate gravity. Hope you understand. This is testing triceps. This is wrist flexion, flexor carpi ulnaris, wrist extension, extensor carpi ulnaris, and brevis. And then lower limb muscles and hip flexion, iliopsoas, L2, 3. So I'm checking first, is he able to move? If the patient is not able to move his limb through the full range of motion, no point in applying the muscle, the resistance. So that means it is just grade 2 power. He's not able to move against the gravity. Knee extensors, very little power, very little resistance. So I will say grade 3. Ankle dorsiflexion by tibialis anterior. Plantar flexion will not test in this position. So this is another video showing weak muscle. So elbow flexors is not able to really move against the gravity. The therapist, he is helping him, is unable to move on his own. This is grade 2 power, not moving against gravity. This is triceps, again grade 2 power because not moving against gravity. So now what should we do? Which position should we test here? We should make him sit or lie down in supine. So now he has eliminated gravity, although he is not supporting the shoulder, which should be done, but he is moving when gravity is eliminated.
Gurpreet, I'll just ask them to say what they want to say because they are raising their hands repeatedly.
Okay.
Can you speak now, Miss Dr. Biswas? Dr. Biswas? Please unmute yourself.
Can they unmute or we have to unmute them?
No, I've allowed them to speak, then they have to unmute. So I'm asking them to unmute. Dr. Biswas, can you speak quickly? I'm repeatedly asking him to unmute, but anyway, then we'll carry on.
Yeah.
Please carry on then. Nobody's speaking.
So again, the same video I'm showing. So it was in sitting position and I've shown you the weak muscles. In prone position, you can test for hip extension and flexion. So knee extensor was tested in sitting position. And knee flexion is best tested to eliminate gravity in prone position. This is hip extension by gluteus maximus. Ask him to keep the knee straight. Now this is knee flexion, which is done by hamstring muscles, that is biceps femoris, semitendinosus. And plantar flexion also is tested in this position, gastrocsoleus, calf muscles. Okay. So again, repeating this prone position, hip extension, knee flexion, and plantar flexion. This is to be tested in prone position. Some examiners are found to ask how you test hip abductors while eliminating the gravity. So hip abductors are gluteus medius. Can you hear me, ma'am? There is some problem with the internet.
I can hear, but
Okay.
I just wondering whether everyone can hear because they've repeatedly.
Raised hands. Okay.
Okay, now they're saying that there's no option for unmuting. They've
Okay.
written
Okay.
so. Then
I
I'll
think
ask.
maybe the videos are not. Okay.
I'll
So
ask
this
her to.
is, yeah. They can ask them the question answers.
Okay.
Shall I continue?
Yes.
This is in sideline position. I'm testing hip abductors, that is gluteus medius and minimus, sartorius and tensor fasciae lata. So this is against gravity. Now this is the hip testing of hip adduction, adduction, adductor longus and brevis. So don't test in sitting position if the child is strong enough. If he is weak, you can test in any position. This is about sideline. Briefly about hand and arm muscles. This is altogether a separate lecture sometimes. Just to remember that radial nerve supplies all the extensors in the arm and some muscles of the thumb, abductor pollicis longus, EDB and extensor digitorum brevis and extensor pollicis longus. Ulnar nerve supplies all the intrinsic muscles of the hand except lobe. What is lobe? Which is supplied by median nerve, lateral two lumbricals, opponens pollicis, and abductor pollicis brevis and flexor pollicis brevis. These are supplied by the median nerve. We'll just try to see this video. This is, I'm testing adductor pollicis. Keep the thumb in the on the line of palm and try to abduct. Patient is keeping in adduction and you try to abduct. So this is. So now this I am testing is abductor pollicis brevis by median nerve. The first was by ulnar nerve. So this is median. So make the thumb in perpendicular. Then is opponens pollicis, again supplied by median nerve. So two muscles of median, opponens pollicis and abductor pollicis brevis. And then extensor pollicis longus, I think. This is extensor pollicis longus and brevis by radial nerve. So in thumb, you can test all the three muscles, all the three nerves, sorry. You can test median, ulnar, and radial nerve in just testing of thumb. So adductor pollicis by ulnar nerve, abductor pollicis brevis by median nerve, opponens pollicis by median nerve, and then lumbricals also will test later, and then this extensors by radial. Already done. This is opponens pollicis, median. You can hear also. This is dab. Introsha of the little finger. middle phalanx. So this is all about hand muscles. You have to practice and keep listening and seeing the videos again and again to practice this. So that comes the end of muscle power. Now come to deep tendon reflexes. If somebody says that reflexes are not elicitable, the most common cause is either you didn't strike the hammer properly or your hammer was not good. To use a proper hammer. So hope you can see this is a which type of hammer. This is a Taylor type of hammer which is most commonly used, but this is not very good when testing a bigger child. So it's better to use this type of hammer. This is a queen square hammer. This gives a good hard blow. There are some other types of hammers also which you can use, but these two are most commonly available, and this is a queen square hammer which should be used for testing at least the bigger children. Smaller children can be tested by any hammer. The newborns, we use thumb also to test the reflexes, and the patient should be comfortable, relaxed, and do not forget to do reinforcement techniques. Gendrasic and jaw clenching is very, very important. Sometimes this is the only way we test the reflexes and rule out any neuropathy. It is very important. This is just, everybody knows biceps, triceps, brachioradialis, knee, ankle. You have to just remember the root values and the nerves. Grading of the reflexes, it is there, but it's not as good as grading of muscle power. The verbal description is better, that whether the reflexes are absent, they are sluggish, they're normal, they're exaggerated, or they are markedly hyperactive with clonus. So we have to just tell the verbal description. And asymmetry is very, very important. But even when asymmetry, just try to check that whether the child is relaxed or not. Because if you test one side, the child may tense the other side, so you may not get a proper reflex. Superficial reflexes, abdominal, we stroke it from inner to outward. Some people say out to inward, so it's okay both ways, I think. Cremasteric, you can stroke on the upper inner aspect of thigh with contraction of cremasteric muscles. Anal reflex, important to test in some kids with spina bifida, whether there is any anal tone and reflexes are preserved or not, because it tells the prognosis of the child. Planters, we know that normal plantar response is called a flexor plantar. Method should be correct. It should start from a lateral part of the foot and go till either you see the response or go till the greater ball of toe. The abnormal response is the Babinski sign is extension of the big toe and abduction of the other toes. There is nothing called as negative Babinski. Babinski means extensor planting. There are some other ways to test. Some people, they do ask what are the different ways to test planters. Just to remember, Oppenheim, Gordon, Schaeffer, Chaddock, we can see it in a video. This is Oppenheim. Just stroking the shin, you can see the extension of the big toe. And Gordon, using the calf muscles, again response is there. And Schaeffer's by squeezing the tendon, endoacheus. And lastly, Chaddock stroking the lateral part of the foot. These are the various methods which you can. Now that's the end to the examination. Just brief about localization or pattern of weakness. If you really want to learn localization, just listen to the talk by Dr. Devyani. It is available on the AOCN website. Very beautifully explained. Just briefly, cerebral cortex, it will cause altered sensorium, seizures, motor and sensory loss. Brainstem, you should know bare minimum this much, that brainstem involvement causes crossed weakness, ipsilateral cranial nerve and contralateral weakness and sensory loss. Spinal cord, you have to look for three things: any bladder involvement, any sensory level, and any upper motor neuron signs like spasticity or extensor plantars. So you have signs, sensory level and bladder involvement that indicates spinal cord. So this was about upper motor neuron. Lower motor neuron, nerve roots, again pain, element weakness, nerves, sometimes difficult to differentiate. Neuromuscular junction, it causes ptosis, diplopia, so bulbar weakness. And muscle, it will cause proximal more than distal weakness. This is a broad overview of how to localize a thing. This much you should know, and the rest you can listen to the other talk. There is sometimes confusion in lower motor neuron weakness because it can arise from various levels like anterior horn cells to roots plexuses. Anterior horn cell diseases, spinal muscular atrophy, root plexuses like most common in children is GBS, and peripheral nerve is peripheral neuropathy, neuromuscular junction disorder is myasthenia, and muscle is myopathies. So if these two, roots plexuses and peripheral nerve, they are easy to differentiate, relatively easy, not always, but if there is sensory involvement. GBS causes a lot of pain, so that is a sensory involvement. And peripheral neuropathy will causes glove and stocking type of sensory loss. Sensory involvement would indicate these two. If it is ocular and bulbar involvement, it will indicate an MJ disorder. But sometimes these anterior horn cells and muscle disease, they are difficult to differentiate. These are some pointers for this, that wasting will be predominant in anterior horn cell disease, and in muscle weakness will be more common than wasting. How many DMDs we see with wasting? It is not prominent, but SMA children, you see there is prominent wasting. Symmetry, again, not very important because both can be, muscle is usually symmetric, but both can be symmetric. Asymmetric distribution also sometimes don't help. Muscles are more proximal. Reflexes, definitely both have hypoareflexia, but anterior horn cell mostly have very early reflex change, and that causes areflexia. This is important. Involuntary movements, if you see fasciculations, polymyoclonus or tremors, that is indicative of anterior horn cell. But in muscle, you will not find fasciculation. So two things, wasting in weakness, wasting, and your fasciculations, that is important to localize anterior, differentiate anterior horn cells from muscle. That is all from my side. And I think now we can answer the questions, ma'am. Are you able to listen?
I have to unmute myself. So Dr. Kocher has just finished his presentation, but now we can go on with the questions. So there were some questions already on the board. First one is, what is plantar withdrawal? Please explain.
Plantar withdrawal is that whenever you test for plantars, there is some withdrawal reflex, which will cause, in addition to your extension of big toe and extension of the other toes, it will cause flexion of the limbs and the adduction of the limb. That is a differentiating point for extensor plantar. It will be withdrawal will be that the patient will be flexing the hip and the knee joint also. I think that answers your question.
Yeah, I also feel that if it is a noxious stimulus, then you get a plantar withdrawal reflex or response. So one should be careful not to make it a noxious stimulus. It should just be a light.
Yes, very correct.
A light stroke rather than pressing very hard and causing pain.
Other questions?
But answer the question. Then the other question is, please explain as the video progresses, power of muscles, including hands, are commonly asked now in exam, mainly DNB. So the hand muscles. So we'll just go back to that. Then suppose there's another question. Suppose the patient is moving slightly, but not in full range while there is elimination of gravity. What is the power, 1 or 2? So I guess please answer.
Suppose the patient is moving slight, but is he moving? If he is moving his joint, that is grade more than 1. It is grade 2 power. If he is not moving against the gravity, right? So if he is not moving at the joint, that is flicker, that is grade 1. अगर joint का movement नहीं है, सिर्फ muscle का flicker है, तो grade 1 है. और अगर joint का थोड़ा सा भी movement है, तो वो grade 2. Am I right, ma'am? It's okay.
Yes, I think you're right. Is that clear to whoever's asking, please? Okay, then there's another question.
Dr. Gurpreet, can you stop share the screen so that your screens are visible? You can stop share.
Okay. One more, I think, all which was left.
Tone assessment, sir. So they're asking you to repeat the tone assessment part.
own assessment. I mean, should I show the video again? Or
Yes, we can do that.
I
And
think this.
also we can go back to the power of muscles of the hands. So just in short, if you can just go over these two things again.
I'll again share my screen and go back to the hand muscle power.
Yes. Arm and hand muscles.
I'm coming back to it. This is, I'll mute the video and try to explain again. If you're able to listen to me. So this first is, I'm testing. You can test two ways. You can test thumb muscles and then other, or you can test the nerve wise. Ulnar nerve muscle first, medial nerve muscles first, and then radial nerve. Radial nerve is very easy. So let's start with thumb muscles first. So first muscle I'm testing is adductor pollicis. So for adductor pollicis, you have to keep the thumb in line with the palm and then apply the resistance to abduction so that adduction is tested. So adductor pollicis, this is supplied by ulnar nerve. All intrinsic muscles except lobe are supplied by ulnar. So this is ulnar nerve. So now the second median nerve muscle which is supplied at thumb are mainly abductor pollicis brevis and opponens pollicis. So this is abductor pollicis. For abductor pollicis, you have to keep the thumb in perpendicular position to the palm and then try to adduct the thumb. Then try to adduct. I mean, you have to keep the thumb in perpendicular position and try to adduct and bring it in the line of palm by applying pressure. That is the way to test abductor pollicis brevis. This is opponens pollicis. Opponens pollicis is try to touch the finger, little finger, and apply the resistance in the opposite side. In video, it's very difficult sometimes to see the resistance, where it is applied. This is supplied, these both are supplied by the median nerve. Now are the radial nerve muscles. So radial nerve will be extensor, digitorum longus, extensor, pollicis longus and brevis. They all three are supplied by the radial nerve. If you apply the pressure in the distal phalanx, it is longus. At proximal phalanx, it is brevis, and if you apply the pressure here at the metacarpal joint, it is abductor pollicis longus. That is also supplied by this abductor pollicis longus is also supplied by the radial nerve. Okay, I hope you understand. Sometimes you have to just remember these things. This is end of thumb muscles. Now is we are testing introiti. So you know that DAB and PAD. DAB is dorsal introitial abductors, AB ductors, and PAD, palmar introitial adductors. So it's very easy to do. The introiti causes fanning of the hand. So you apply the pressure on the opposite side. You test first, and you can test all, but it's important to test first and the little finger introiti. So apply pressure to the outside, and you're trying to push inside. Okay, so these are dorsal introiti. This is dorsal introiti of the last finger or the little finger. Right. So now palmar introiti adduction. So PAD. So this is called card test. They are trying to adduct, and you are trying to oppose the resistance by applying same force. You will also hold it the same fashion as the patient is holding. This is intrinsic muscles of the hands, lumbricals. The lateral two lumbricals are supplied by median and other two by this. For lumbricals, you have to make this swan position. And as this is the function of lumbricals, you have to oppose it. First, you have to extend the metacarpophalangeal joint. You try to extend the metacarpophalangeal. This is the first part. Second is you try to flex these interphalangeal joints. So this is the work of, to keep the hand muscles like this is the work of lumbricals. Just try to see the video. Otherwise, you can read from books also. If I'm trying to extend the metacarpophalangeal, this is the first part, and apply pressure to the opposite side to extend it. And then try to flex the interphalangeal joints. Try to flex the interphalangeal joints. So now these are the long muscles of the arm, that is flexor digitorum superficialis. You try to extend the distal phalanx, apply pressure, extending it, and the patient will try to flex it. And in middle phal, if you do it, then it is flexure digitorum profundus. If you remember anatomy, it is inserted proximally. Now, lastly, wrist flexors. On both the sides, you should test radial side and ulnar side. Radial side would test FCO and FCR. Then wrist extensor by radial. Hope I think hand muscles are clear, but sometimes you have to practice again and again to know.
Okay, so there were 2 or 3 questions on hand movements. So I think they've all been answered. Now there's another question that if a child can move a muscle against gravity, but not through the entire range, would it be grade 2 or grade 3 power?
It will be grade 3. He is moving against gravity. It is grade 3. But if he is not moving at all against resistance, it becomes 3 minus. So it is 3 minus, 3 and 3 plus. Very minimal resistance, or he's not able to sustain at all, it is 3 minus. Some resistance, very minor resistance is 3, and better than that is 3 plus. So, but
Then
yeah.
one question is about that slide in which you had shown what position for each joint, you know, like for each muscle, what position you have. So there was one slide which was showing this.
I'll just show that. This is the slide. You should, you can see it on the web also. It is available in sitting position. I have shown the videos also. Shoulder abductors, elbow extensor flexor, wrist flexor extensor, intrinsic muscles of the hand also in sitting position. You also then hip flexor, knee extensor, and ankle dorsiflexion. Supine is for mainly neck flexors, abdominals, trunk muscles also in supine position. Somebody asked that questions also. And pectoralis also in supine. Standing, gastrocnemius, ask the patient to just stand on the toes. Side-lying hip abductors and adductors. Prone is good for hip extension, knee flexion, and shoulder extension, neck extension.
Okay, then another one is on trunk power. How do you test power of the trunk muscles?
I think we ask the patient to get up and look for Devor sign also. If there is upper trunk weakness, there will be deviation of the umbilicus to the upper side, and the patient may not be able to get up from supine to sitting position. That is how we test for trunk muscles.
Then another one is, you know, please repeat tone assessment. So,
okay. Should I repeat tone? I'll just show briefly what are the main points. Just see the main points that ask the patient to relax, secure the limb. In upper limb, you should start by shaking the hands of the patient and rotating by seeing the pronator tone, and then you flex extend. And you have to do it in different velocities. First, slow to look for rigidity, and then for spasticity, you have to move it sudden fast movement. So because that is the definition of spasticity, it is velocity dependent. And then if you're testing flexor tone, the limb should be flexed to start with. You extend the limb, that is testing flexor tone. Just show you in the videos, the main important is relaxation and varying speeds. If you do it, that is correct. In this, I'm not varying much speed. I'm just showing the shake hands, roll it, then flexion, extension. Just see that when the child, I'm extending from flexion position, I'm facing difficulty. So that is flexor power, flexor tone is increased. Flexor muscle of the upper limb tone is increased. Okay. And then the other side, do not forget to compare the tone, because in exams you will be asked to demonstrate the method. It is sometimes subjective, so if it is not, there are some minor differences, it will not matter, but methods will matter. Just see the lower limbs, first roll over to test the adductors and abductor tone. It's a quick method. Then flick the knee to test for spasticity. Then flexion, extension, and varying speeds. Ekdam zor se. This is extension, so extensor. Extended है knee तो extensor tone. Flex knee से extend करेंगे तो flexor tone. Now at ankle joint, both dorsiflexion, plantar flexion at varying speeds. This is important to catch the Achilles TA tightness. Again, sudden flexion, sudden extension. That will give you a catch. In this child, lower limb weakness, lower limb tone was increased. Wrist. Do not forget to test every joint, possible joint. I mean, shoulder, wrist, elbow, hip, knees. That is about tone assessment.
Okay, the next question is that what is the ideal position to check power? Is it mid-contracted position or fully contracted position?
Better ways to test in fully contracted because muscle is strongest in contracted state. So if I'm testing a flexor biceps, so I'll ask him कि आप मोड़ के रखो, मुझे सीधा मत करने दो. So this is very difficult to do. To test ideally triceps, I'll ask him to raise the arm. मुझे सीधा है, मुझे मोड़ने मत दो. So test this in extended position, this triceps is contracted. So this is the better way. But sometimes examiners, they differ in this. But better way and to test the real strength, you should do when the muscle is contracted fully. And then you should start testing. Break, this is called as break test. You should do the break test.
Okay, then another one is hand muscles also we grade from 0 to 5. I mean, the
ideally yes, but it is very difficult for us in routine because this is mainly meant for like some carpal tunnel syndrome weakness, and if there is some bullet injury, some nerve single injury, so that is for grading that power. But in our pediatric age group, we do not get such children. Ideally, they should also be graded in the same way as the other muscles. But in MMT, manual muscle testing, that MRC scale, hand muscles are not included. The MRC scale was for peripheral nerve injuries. So in that injuries, hand muscles were not included, but we have to test hand muscles separately to quantify the nerves. So ideally, yes, you should test the same power grading you should do in hand muscles.
Okay, another one is how to test hip adduction against gravity.
Hip abduction is tested in sideline position. I think I showed the video. I'll try again. Hip abduction.
No, adduction. ADD.
I'll show them. That was in the same video. This is sideline video. Just see. This is hip abduction first, and then I'll hold the upper limb, and then ask him to raise the lower limb straight. Because this child is weak, his adductor is weak, then it is difficult to raise. I'll just show again. I'm asking him to lift the lower limb this against resistance. Another way is to ask him to get up. There is a sign called as hip abduction sign because of hip adductor weakness. Just read it by Dr. It was described by Dr. Adilkar. And the child or the patient, he abducts the hips like this and then he gets up. So that is another way to test. Just ask him to get up from the squatting position. If adductors are weak, he will get up by abducting the limbs. Hope that clears the question.
Okay, then in MRC there are only 3. Is there any 3 minus?
There is 3 minus, 3 and 3 plus, 4 minus, 4 and 4 plus, but that is a little advanced for research purposes. If you are very much keen to know, there are definitely, it is available everywhere. You can see 3 minus, 3, 3 plus, 4 minus, 4, 4 plus. So MRC grading is definitely it has 3 and 3 minus, but for exam purposes, we do not try to go into that.
Then how to test difference between truncal hypotonia versus truncal weakness?
Okay, truncal hypotonia, tone is when you this becomes more important in infants. So whenever you try to lift, do a pull to sit maneuver, if you remember, so that will show as truncal hypotonia. If the child is not able to lift his neck, and then you prone the child, and if that is also floppy, the next neck extensor tone is also reduced. But that tone and power in infancy testing is a little debatable. So almost it is, I think, tone and power are tested in the same way in infants.
What does velocity dependent mean in spasticity?
That I was talking that if the muscle is moved faster, sudden movement will cause increase in spasticity. That is called as velocity. If you move a limb faster, and if you find a resistance when you move the limb suddenly, that is velocity dependent. And if the movement is same, the resistance is same in the whole movement during the whole movement, that is rigidity. It is not velocity dependent. Hope I am making it clear.
Okay, then in case of hypertonia, can we assess power? Can we assess
Hypertonia. Yes, we can. I mean spasticity. When the child is spastic, we can grade power if the child is cooperative. But if there are contractures, it is difficult. If there are already contractures, then you should mention in your examination that because of the contractures, true power cannot be tested. If there is a TA contracture, I cannot test the dorsiflexor. But if there is no contracture, I can.
The next one is also how the contracture should be examined. So this one is
Contractures are of two types. They can be fixed contractures or they can be dynamic contractures. If you are not able to move through the full range of motion at all, that means it is a fixed contracture. If you are moving suddenly, I mean with fast velocity, there is you are not able to move, and when you move the limb slowly, it is extended or flexed. That means the contracture is dynamic. Still, you are able to reach to its flexibility or extensibility position, but not able to do it fully or at all the positions. So contracture should be tested in the same way.
Please repeat how to test hip extension.
Hip extension we did in prone position. I'll try to show again. Hip extension in prone. This is hip extension video. I'll ask the patient to extend, lift the hip, lift his limb, and will apply the resistance in opposite direction. It is clear. In prone position, ask the patient to lift the limb. This is the ideal way. But if it is weak, and another way to test hip extensor and quadriceps is Gower sign. Gower sign is because of weakness of hip extensors and the knee extensor, hip flexors, knee extensors, and hip extensor.
One could also do it in supine position with the hip flexed slightly, and then the patient tries to extend it once and the examiner applies resistance.
Yeah, that is also correct.
Okay. Difference between spasticity and rigidity.
We have already talked. Spasticity is velocity dependent, rigidity is in full range of motion. Spasticity is because of corticospinal tract involvement, rigidity is because of extrapyramidal tracts involvement or basal ganglia and the extrapyramidal tracts being problem.
Okay, like the hip for shoulder adduction, abduction, also do we test in side lying?
Shoulder abduction is to be tested in sitting or standing position. That is because you have to eliminate the gravity. Shoulder abduction, yes, you will have to do it in, I think, side lying position, because otherwise it's very difficult to eliminate the gravity. Or in lying down, I'll have to check. I'm not very sure about it. Shoulder adduction, how I test to eliminate gravity.
No, the abduction is the deltoid muscle, isn't it?
Yes,
So
yes. It is in
sitting or standing position.
Yeah.
I you need to have lying down. Abduction you're talking about, no? So
adduction, I'm not sure. Abduction and abduction in sitting and standing, but adduction he was asking. I think adduction, I'm not sure. That is.
one just applies resistance to the, in the abducted position,
Yeah.
one can apply resistance. Okay, then can we grade power in the presence of hypotonia?
Yes, definitely. Power grading is definitely meant for hypotonic or a floppy child. So you have to grade whether he is moving against gravity And if he's moving against gravity, against resistance, so definitely hypotonia, and that means a floppy child is weak floppy or a strong floppy. You can only test by power testing, and you can grade the power.
In case of dystonia, can we test power and tone?
It is little difficult, but definitely you can test for spasticity, because if the child is relaxed, it needs a little bit cooperation for the child from the child, because if dystonia is active, then it is difficult to check the tone. It is sometimes difficult if there are extrapyramidal movements.
What is R1 and R2 in case of testing contractures?
I think there are some angles. These are the angles, I think, Tardieu scale for spasticity. If you suddenly flex, suppose, ankle joint, that is the position where it reaches is R1, and then you slowly do it, it is R2. But I'm not very sure. I'll have to check. This is Tardieu scale of spasticity. We use Ashworth commonly, but some people do Tardieu scales.
Yes, Ashworth scale is what one uses. Can you repeat tone examination? Again, can you repeat tone examination of upper limb, elbow and shoulder joint?
I think we've shown. Should I repeat once?
And tone is not like at. Yeah, you can just show quickly because already we have passed the time.
Yeah.
Participants have raised their hands.
You can add if something is there, because people are not able to understand, I think, tone. You were adding something.
Yeah, I mean, the tone is, for each muscle separately, we do not test tone. But just at the shoulder joint and all, it's just like when you're making movements at the joint, you can assess the tone at that time.
I think that is.
Okay, but somebody, I'm allowing them to talk. Dr. Shankar Borkar, can you talk, please? What is Hoffman's H reflex?
I think it is another way to test hyperreflexia in the upper limbs. We just strike the hammer here, and there is flexion of the limbs and adduction of the thumb. That is Hoffman reflex. In one of them, we flicker the distal phalanx, and I don't remember the exact name of that reflex. And then again, there is flexion of the fingers. That is a hyperreflexic area is increased. This is another way to test the upper motor neuron signs in upper limbs.
Okay. What is variable tone? When do we say a patient has variable tone?
Variable tone, many times this is seen mainly in dystonia when the child, when relaxed, and also spasticity also is affected by the anxiety of the child, and the tone sometimes is increased, and when you start testing with anxiety increases, it increases. But mainly this happens in extrapyramidal movements, in the dystonia.
All right, I think we've covered most of the questions. Not all of them, but some of the questions were similar, so one answer is enough for them. Excellent presentation, Dr. Kochhar. And it is difficult to arrange all the videos and everything. He's done a great job. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
And thank you participants for being interested and listening so carefully. And things will be on the website of AOCN. So although I'm not very, very sure about that, but we'll try to do that. Okay? So
thank you, Dr. Rashmi. Thank you, Dr. Gurpreet. We are very grateful to both of you for joining the evening and making it a learning event. So all the postgraduate presentations will be uploaded in the AOCN website. So please visit AOCN website. It will be soon uploaded. Many of them are already uploaded. Few are more going to come. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Good night. Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Good night, Kaushik. Good night, ma'am.